Well, it's doing so, the coalition, because of these pro-Palestine and pro-Israel protesters and what's escalating at the moment. Joining me now is University of Sydney National Tertiary Education Union President and Senior Lecturer as well, Dr Riemer. Thank you for your time. How would you characterise what's happening with these protests at the moment? Are you concerned? Are they getting sort of more tense and threatening to escalate?
No, that's not my impression at all, Tom. We've got a large encampment here at Sydney University out the front lawns. They're holding teach-ins, they're sometimes having demonstrations, people are eating, sleeping in the tents. It's an entirely peaceful way of making a particular claim about what should be happening at the university, which is that the university should be, ending its collaboration with the war industry and cutting its ties with Israeli higher education. So we have to acknowledge, I think, that there are an enormously widespread group of people who are participating there. There are lots of Jewish people, as well as Palestinian people, and just ordinary members of the community from, different groups to either of those communities.
Seen some reports, perhaps the tensions will increase. There is more of a presence of so-called professional protesters or people well outside the usual university type, or just the students, I guess. Have you seen any evidence of that?
No, I mean, the Gaza encampment at Sydney University is of considerable community interest, so it obviously does get visitors. But my read, and I've been up there regularly, is that it's very largely students, it's community supporters, it's young people. So I don't see any reason to see it as anything other than an authentic expression of support that exists for Palestine.
You mentioned the encampment and where it is, so essentially on the front lawns. We've seen in the US where things have really escalated, occupying buildings. Would that grow beyond a peaceful protest? Because then you are starting to encroach on what is still a learning education environment where people are paying for degrees and so on?
I mean, the encampment itself is a learning space, Tom. I mean, one of the regular features of their program there is teach-ins, where, the one I was at recently had 30 or 40 people at it, listening to a visiting professor from the US give a seminar, essentially. So the encampments themselves are places of learning. I don't think the students' intention is in any way to occupy buildings. They're just there out in the open in the rain, asserting that this is their university too, and they've got strong feelings about what it should be doing. I share those feelings entirely.
And when it comes to the peaceful element of it, one thing that has been a source of tension between, if you like, the two sides, has been some of the chants or slogans, if you like, in particular from the river to the sea. Is this something you'd condone? Do you at least see it as problematic, given what many Jewish people feel it actually means, as in they shouldn't have a Jewish state?
I don't feel that that's problematic at all, and I chant that myself, Tom. From the river to the sea needs to be understood as a call for equality and freedom for everyone between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. And the Palestine Solidarity Movement is very explicit about that. It wants Jewish people, Christian people, Muslim people, people of no religion, to be able to live side by side in freedom and equality. And wherever they've come from, however long they've been there, and that's very much not the situation that exists in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip at the moment, where Palestinians are discriminated against, the object of a permanent war by Israel. And that's why we've seen, 100,000 people in Gaza since October the 7th who have been, either wounded, maimed or killed, with tens of thousands of more lying under the rubble. That's what the Gaza encampment at universities around Australia and also internationally is responding to, I think.
Does it? So you said, well, I guess what it means for you and that it is around peace for everyone from the river to the sea. It has been used by Hamas, including the founder before, in not a peaceful context at all, frankly. Does that trouble you at all? Is it important to try to delineate? Because, there's nothing peaceful about Hamas as an organisation.
I think we just need to be very clear about what organisations have and haven't said. The Palestine Solidarity Movement that is running the encampments, that's running the weekly protests that are going on in lots of places like Sydney couldn't have been more explicit, Tom, about what it stands for. It regularly platforms Jewish speakers. It regularly platforms Christians. It regularly platforms people, who are of no particular religious commitment. I don't think we could be any clearer. The head of the Australia-Palestine Advocacy Network, Nasser Mashni, gave a talk at Sydney Uni, I think just last week, where he made exactly this point. What we want is freedom and equality for everyone. We're not responsible for what other groups are saying. Hamas isn't at our protests. I can't speak for or even particularly about Hamas. What I can talk about is the explicit politics that are being advanced by me and by the students and by everyone I see at solidarity protests that are happening in the major capitals around Australia at the moment.
As for Hamas using that phrase before, and you mentioned, in fact, Nasser Mashni, I mean, he's previously been pushed on Hamas and said not all of it should be considered a terrorist organisation. What's your view on that? I mean, Hamas is a pretty brutal organisation which has made pretty clear from what I've seen, it doesn't think Israel should exist at all.
I mean, look, I'm not an expert on Hamas, so you should take whatever I say about it with a grain of salt. What I understand is that the most recent Hamas charter de facto accepts the current boundaries of Israel. Hamas has a military wing, which is what has been, designated as a terrorist organisation by some governments. It's not just a military organisation, though. It also runs schools and hospitals within the Gaza Strip. It's a political organisation. It's complicated. It's easy for us, perhaps, to sit in Australia and say, yes, it's just a terrorist organisation. That's just not good enough. If we're going to have a serious analysis of what's going on in the world, we've got to be open to the way that something like that is a cross-cutting, confederation of a whole lot of different things and different kinds of ideas about how to prosecute a particular ambition, which is the ambition for freedom for the Palestinian people.
Look, it's a long, complex area. I'm sure we could chat for a while, but I've got to leave it there. Dr. Nick Riemer, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.